Yes.
Hi, I'm Bob Armstrong, Director of Partnership for Missional Church with Church Innovations.
And I'm Pat Taylor Ellison. I'm the Managing Director of Research and Development at Church Innovations.
And coming January 30th through February 1st, we have the Think Tank for Missional Church meeting this year in Dallas, Texas. And Pat, what's the topic we're going to be having this year?
The convening question for us this year, different from the other years, it's different every year, is how do stories work to form Christian community around the mission of God in the world?
So we're going to be having a number of different people presenting at the Think Tank like you would have in many kind of conferences, but what do you think really makes the Think Tank different from a conference?
Well, as you say, a presenter can bring a certain set of information to participants, but the think tank allows the participants to talk amongst themselves, talk back to the presenter, and actually begin a rolling conversation in small groups and then in plenary, so that really from a small seed of presentation information, the whole gathered community, which usually numbers 50 to 70 persons, creates a conversation about that topic.
So not only would there be a presenter to kind of the whole group several different times during this event, there's also then small groups you talk about. Is there something special about the small groups?
The small groups are formed by people who, generally speaking, are in a similar social location. So, for example, the social location of seminary educators. There might be some young church scholars who are in seminary professorships that might make one cohort. There might be some missional bishops, church body executives in another cohort. There might be missional pastors or lay leaders in another cohort. So that the conversation that gets generated in response to the presenter really is realistic and important for that social location of the participants in that cohort.
So people can begin to discuss, apply, evaluate the presentations in ways that they can take home or that would make sense to them.
And even dream and imagine what that would look like back in their own place.
So pastors and lay leaders might think about the local church context, bishops, presbyters, district presidents would think about it in another.
That's right, that's right. And because this is a missional church conversation that we're generating in the think tank, what we're hoping is that it pushes each of the participants to actually build something between this think tank and the next think tank.
Build something, that would mean do something?
Do something and be in community with their conversation partnership,
Okay.
the think tank in between. So we'll be setting up some kind of a web interface. It could be an interactive website, it could be a set of conversations online where people can continue to get together and share what they've actually put into place back at home or what questions they're exploring with their fellow members of whichever community they belong to.
So what kind of people might be presenting on this sort of question of how do stories work to form Christian community around God's mission?
Well, that's a good question. And we have partnership congregations who will be present at the think tank, particularly ones local to Dallas and related to Abilene Christian University, who is our co-sponsor this year. So we have congregation members who've been experimenting with this sort of thing. We have a couple of professors who may join us from South Africa who might talk about the role of narrative and story in God's mission in South Africa, especially as the church has seen it develop over the last 20 years.
And I guess they come from fairly different perspectives in South African church experience.
Yeah, that's right, and even different locations in the country, one from Pretoria, one from Stellenbosch, so we're looking forward to that. We have Lois Barrett, who could be considered a founding generation of the missional church movement because she's part of the old Gospel in Our Culture network who really was the seminal organization that started writing about this.
She was actually one of the authors of that book, Missional Church, wasn't she?
Yes, and she and some of the other people from the GOCN co-authored, and she edited Treasure in Clay Jars, which was a congregational studies book, really, of congregations who had the marks of missional church, or missional church patterns, as the book calls them.
And I think you mentioned to me something in a conversation about she has a unique experience of the role of storytelling and her experience of churches when she was writing that book, researching it.
She would claim that the ones that were most successfully missional and connecting with the community were the ones that had sort of little secret cohorts of people who could tell stories. People who could figure out what the narrative...
These are people who just spin yarns, they were entertaining, or something else?
Sort of. But whose stories about the life of the congregation, and particularly the life of the congregation as it perceived God's call for it in its community, as they appropriated those stories and told them over and over, spun the yarns, if you will. Maybe it was at Quilting Circle, but it could have been anywhere in church life.
So it wasn't just stories about what Aunt Mildred or Uncle John did or so-and-so, but how what they did was a part of a bigger story of what God was up to in the community.
And that is a mark of the missional church for Lois, because those persons who could tell those stories actually gave the church's capacities to tell their stories in the community.
So this is the sort of thing we're going to be exploring, not just at an intellectual or academic level, but also at a practical level, and ideally create conversations among cohorts and across cohorts, so we can discover what God is doing among us and how God is inviting us to be a part of God's story.
Exactly.
Wherever God has sent us.
And our hope is that the ongoing conversation between this think tank and the one the following year will actually move the story forward in the community as we get more accustomed to looking at what God is up to in the world.
So it sounds like something valuable to be a part of if you want to be a part of missional church at all.
Yep. Sign up.